What's up, you guys? I'm Dan, this is Frugal Not Cheap, and today we'll look at the question, can Americans afford to buy houses? I've got some friends who are probably looking to start a family and buy a house over the next couple of years. So this topic has been a little bit on my mind. Also just looking at the housing market in general and how crazy it got during the COVID period. Now, the first question that people seem to ask, at least if you've watched House Hunters, that's the impression that you get, is how big of a mortgage can I get approved for? Now, one thing to get out of the way here is that, of course, there's going to be huge variability across the country. So comparing the situation in Miami versus, a small town in Wyoming or something, it's really not going to make sense to compare those two things. So what we're going to do here is what I've been doing in the past with most of my examples, where we look at median figures. So I think that can give us a good representative idea, a case to work with. So in the past, for most things like a budget analysis or saving for retirement, I've used the example of the median personal income. But today we're going to be looking at median household income. And that's because unless you're house hacking or you really care about sort of a lot of the things that come along with home ownership, it generally will make more financial sense for a single person to be looking at renting or owning a condo or maybe a townhome at the largest, something like that. When we look at single family home ownership, this makes a lot more sense for a family, so that's what we're going to be looking at. According to the Census Bureau's current population survey, median household income is just over $70,000 at $70,784. As I just pointed out a moment ago, they do note that there's huge variability across the country, ranging from $40,000 and below in some cities to over $150,000 in others. For ease, we'll call this $70,000. And instead of looking at the overall median financial picture, most of the people on this channel should be doing a little bit better than the average. Not only that, but while the median individual tends to carry a credit card or student loan debt load, with the very high interest rates that people are likely to have for both of those, it makes a whole lot of sense to pay that stuff off. You can always add in some debt when you do your own calculations, of course. If we use Google's mortgage approval calculator, which looks to be pretty good, it says we could be approved for a $300,000 house with our $70,000 income, assuming we make a 20% down payment. So that means that the actual mortgage we'd get approved for would be $240,000. This translates into a monthly payment at current interest rates of $1,664, but we do have other expenses to consider. The median U.S. Property tax rate is about 1.1%, so for a $300,000 house, that's $3,300 a year. Texas, which is the example that popped up here for me because that's where I am based, then is going to be pretty similar, a little bit higher, at $3,750 a year. In any case, with taxes and fees added on, our total payment ends up being $2,065 a month. That's just under $25,000 a year at $24,780. Let's call it $25,000. Well, that's just under 36% of our gross income. Not great. Now, little detour here, you might be thinking, Dan, $60,000, that's quite a significant down payment to make. Why not something more like $20,000? Well, the thing is, if we did do that, then we'd have to get what's called private mortgage insurance, or PMI. And that in this case would be $182 a month. Now, while that doesn't seem like a huge difference, at least in the short run for a month or two, this really adds up over time because it also means that those are dollars that you could be deploying towards the principal of the loan, but you're not, they're just evaporating. Additionally, it brings our total monthly outlay here to $2,514, which is now $30,000 a year or 43% of our gross annual income. In both these scenarios, we are what I would consider to be house poor, or at least too house poor for my liking, especially when you consider that you also need to set aside 1% of the purchase price in order to keep up with maintenance on the home. So that's another $3,000 a year or $250 a month. To make matters worse, and basically this is how my research went, is the more and more I looked at the situation, the worse it got. $300,000 is not the median family home price. So how much is the median family home price? Well, according to data from the St. Louis Fed, it's up to $416,000 as of last quarter. So that's a heck of a lot higher, and actually there are only 16 states where the median home price is at $300,000 or less. It does include states like Pennsylvania, Illinois, Iowa, Kentucky, and Indiana, which have some pretty good places to live, but of course home prices will be higher in the metro areas. But basically, as we can see here from the chart of the median home price, things went totally nuts and way out of bounds for the overall trend that had been forming during COVID. And things started to improve in the second quarter, but I'm actually seeing some news out there that prices are starting to tick higher again, unfortunately. If we were to try and stretch and buy this medium family home of $416,000, that would bring our total monthly payment up to $3,185, then adding in the 1% for maintenance, and we're at $3,532. That's half of our gross income. So let's quickly summarize what we've learned so far. At current interest rates, the median household income should mean an approval with a 20% down payment for a $300,000 house. The actual median home price is way beyond that at over $400K. Both of these scenarios leave us house poor. And one of the big problems impacting all of this math is that current interest rates are quite high. As you can see, we have built in over a 7% rate into these, even with a very strong credit score. If rates were to fall back down to 3%, say, then things would look a heck of a lot more manageable. With 20% down, our total cost is down to $1,413 a month. That's $17K a year, or 24% of our gross income. Again, much more manageable. So we've looked at what mortgages we could get approved for. We looked at what houses actually cost. What are some rules of thumb that are out there about what kind of a price range you should be looking at? Well, one rule that's out there is called the 28-36 rule, and this could be especially helpful for those of you that have a scenario where you do have some debt that you're carrying while you're trying to make this decision. So the 28-36 rule, well, the 28 part, that is that the mortgage principal and interest should be no more than 28% of your gross annual income. And the 36% means that you should be at 36% or less of your gross annual income when you add in your debt payments on top of the mortgage principal and interest. There are also different rules depending on your debt load for about what kind of a multiple of your household income you should look for in a home purchase price. So there's a 3x, 4x, and 5x rule. The $300,000 house in our example we looked at would be 4.3x. So all this background out of the way, what would I do personally? Well, personally, I like to keep my housing expenses at 25% or a quarter of my net income, so just income after taxes. And if I were buying a home, I would be looking at a fixed rate 30-year mortgage and certainly hoping to refinance given the current rates. Again, we're looking at a family in our scenario, so if we were married filing jointly, we'd be eligible for a $27,700 standard deduction from our federal taxes. That cuts our taxable income down to $42,300, so we pay $2,200 in the 10% tax bracket, plus another $2,436 in the 12% tax bracket. And that puts our total tax liability at $4,636, or just 6.6% of our gross. This is on the high side for your federal tax liability, because in our scenario we're not making any retirement contributions, which could be done pre-tax. And we also haven't included any healthcare as well, which is also tax deductible. Anyway, net income after taxes is then $65,364. So a quarter of that would be $16,341, which comes out to $1,362 a month. And actually that's pretty in line with the $300,000 house if interest rates were to fall back down to 3%. But with rates where they are now at over 7%, in order to follow my rule of 1/4, we'd be capped at a home of just $215,000, and that's going to be pretty difficult in many housing markets. So you might ask, is all hope lost? Well, no, because there is another alternative to buying a home, and that is renting. At some point, I'll probably do a rent versus buy kind of deep dive if I haven't already. I'll have to check my backlog of videos. But just to do some quick sort of back of the envelope math, we saw earlier that buying the median home of $416,000 would put our total housing expenses at over $3,500 a month, or 50% of our median gross annual income as a household. By contrast, the median single family U.S. rental price is $2,062 a month, much more affordable. That's 29% of our gross, and still relatively in line with the math that I would use. One useful metric to look at your particular area is what's called the price to rent ratio. What we do is we compare the home price against what it would rent for on an annualized basis. So you can take the rent and multiply by 12, take the price and divide it by that. If we do this for these medians, we would take the 416,100 and divide it by the annualized rent of 2060. That annualized rent comes out to just under 25K at 24,744, and we get a 16.81 price to rent ratio. The sort of rule out there is that if it's 15 or lower, then it makes sense to buy. And if it's above 15, then it's leaning in favor of renting, which as you can see is the case right now. So again, there's going to be huge variability based on location and everyone's situation and preferences, but just looking at the basic math, looking at the medians, it looks like one, houses are expensive, and also that the current situation does favor renting, especially with interest rates being so high. That's my personal take on it, how I would look at it. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.